Welcome to MasterMined, the behavioral health business podcast. We go beyond the clinical to explore what it really takes to build, grow, and lead a successful behavioral health organization. Each episode features candid, practical conversations with industry leaders, offering strategies to scale your business while staying true to your mission. From branding and marketing to leadership, culture, and compliance, we cover the tools you need to balance care and commerce with confidence. MasterMined is brought to you by Snapshot, a digital agency on a mission to serve with heart, execute with excellence, and build something bigger together. And now, welcome to MasterMined.
Welcome back to another episode of MasterMined, where we are rethinking behavioral health. This week, we'll go higher level into overall business strategy basics. I wanted to say thank you for being a part of the show to my fabulous co-host, Lee Pepper and Jeff Skillen. Thank you for being a part of this. You guys are going to add so much value on this topic. Now that we're leaving marketing and we're going into the strategy of the overall business. And, something I've heard you guys both talk about is just, pushing your clients to think bigger and building something that's going to last. And I guess just kind of leaning into that, maybe give us some of your thoughts on how do you do that? Why is it important? And maybe just lean into how you work with behavioral health programs.
I guess I would start saying that a lot of times when I start working with an organization, they haven't had those questions posed to them. And so they've started something because they're good at it or they feel like a calling to do it, and they haven't really thought about what an intersection in that road might look like or what paths they might be able to take as a result. And so even taking them on a potential journey of what's possible for them is really an enlightening to a lot of folks. And I would say that you can put programs kind of in two buckets. Some programs that might be built to last, like you say, and then others that are being built to sell.
Great point.
And then think about, are you looking to exit? And if so, to whom and why? And what would a potential buyer want? And then built to last, and you're like, what's your succession plan? If that's the case, it's like at some point, staff will turn over, but how do you keep the mission cohesive?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that comment, Jeff, about built to last versus built to sell. I mean, I've been on both sides, and I would say that a lot of times it starts with, we've got this data room, we got to go, put all this data in the data room, and everybody's running around and trying to figure out, do you have this report? Do you have this report? And I need this document. I need this status report. And it becomes almost like what we advise people on the transactional. It becomes very transactional. Mm-hmm. And a lot of this could be avoided if we had really good documentation and work done on the front end, just to make sure that everybody knows what they're doing, what role they're playing, and that you've got the data kind of already done. If you're to the point where you're having to quickly go and grab stuff and create stuff, it's a little late.
Yeah.
Because if you would just do the work, and this is where when I discuss this with some of my clients, they've done the hard work when it comes on the clinical side. They've got licensure. They've got their permits. Mm-hmm. But yet when it comes to marketing, they're afraid to step into that area, maybe because they don't have the experience. And I would say, probably the closest thing that I think pushes some of my clients to really kind of start getting a little more serious is when they say, I got to get into paid search, so I got to get Legit Script certified. Because they're being put through the ringer there with Legit Script. So it's just better, I think, just to demand from your team, whether it's an agency partner or whether it's internal, that they have to create some of this best practice documentation like you would in any business.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I would say that while we set up two buckets to say built to last versus built to sell, I think the reality of what Lee just illustrated, that's true for both. Mm-hmm. And I think for a lot of organizations who see maybe a longer time horizon, or they feel like this is a legacy project for them, they get a little lazy about their documentation because they're like, okay, that's not really our mission. And it's on point that is like Legit Script is what usually gets people to sit up straight and realize that they've got to be accountable to an outside agency. But so does Joint Commission. and so does CARF. And I mean, the various things that you have to do to be legitimate from a provider standpoint. Your marketing should be the same thing. So I guess the point I want to make is that it's true for both buckets, but a lot of times those that feel like they have a longer time horizon, they kind of take the slow lane.
Remind me on the next episode, I need to bring a prop. Because I have got, at Foundations, we had, I want to say it was 40 or 50 pages. We had this beautiful full color print. Do you remember it?
Yeah, yeah.
And it was basically a keynote presentation, and we just printed it because we were having to do the road show and all this and that, and so we printed it, and then I use that at Specialty Care and at the Meadows and some of my current clients now, and it just, again, it's to be a living document, right? But boy, it really gives the team pride when they can say, hey, this is what we're doing on LinkedIn, and here's examples of our posts, and here's our schedule and timing, and here's what we're doing for our SEO strategy. Here's our keyword strategy on PPC. I mean, all of a sudden, when you see it documented out, now all of a sudden, all the players know the role they're playing. And I know Jeff saw it. I don't know if you saw it, Mark, but we used to be famous for having lots of monitors in our office.
Yeah, I have seen them. Yeah,
and a lot of times, when we were doing tours, people would come in and they would want to know, what is the purpose of all this data? Well, some monitors were so that we could make real-time decisions, right? We needed to make decisions on our bid strategy for that day, for this program and paid search, great. But for other things like, okay, here's all the top blogs for the day that people are hitting. Part of that was more making sure that our copy editors and our writers knew the role they were playing. Because a lot of times, some of the work that's done behind the scenes, it's hard to measure as to what was the impact on a patient's life that day.
Yep.
But so that's what a lot of our monitors were doing. We're showing each of those teams, whether it was social or it was the content team, so they could see, wow, this is the impact you're having, not just on our business, like we've got that, but also on people's lives. And so that's where I think the documentation it's just better for you to start now than waiting till when all of a sudden the data room's live and you've got 24 hours to put stuff in it.
Yeah. Well, and let's face it, it's when you're for a smaller agency or for a smaller organization that's just getting started, you're going to be very personality oriented, right? You're going to be you're going to fill roles based upon people's skills and then based on their personality, right? But you're going to quickly learn that has a limit. And then the only thing that moves you beyond that box is process and procedure and documentation, because you can't scale based on personality, and you can't scale based upon, no matter how great someone is, no matter how great Susie is, or no matter how great Timmy is about a certain thing. It's like there's a limit, and they may not always be part of your organization.
Yeah. I love how you guys kick this off as far as, built to last versus built to sell. And as we go through this episode, I mean, hopefully we can straddle the line of, just, hey, here's what we see, but maybe give a point on each side as we're going through this of like what you would do, like what do buyers look for? And then on the built to last, like what is it that you're going to do that's going to build an enduring program that's going to be around for 50, 60 years. I think that'll be great for the audience. Like, let me just ask you first question, just what do you see where great programs end up dying out because of maybe poor, marketing or strategy around either one of these ways? What are you guys seeing?
You mean
yeah.
So to me, one of the first things that I look for in a program that is going to be built to last is an alumni program. And when you see people that are, and again, from my perspective, I talked in previous episodes about we were spending 10% of net revenue on marketing. That includes alumni. Alumni is part of that, because who is your best customer advocate, your best ambassador, your best ally? It's somebody that got well at your facility. And so if you will actually spend hard dollars, right, investing in a real alumni program, that's a built to last, right? Because you want to keep growing that program. We used to have this graph that was aspirational that showed that if if all your patients would refer one patient a year, just refer, not even a converted lead, but just refer. Like after so many years, you wouldn't even need other kinds of marketing, right? Because you would have touched so many lives in the community. Yeah. But we don't. That's a built to last mentality. Now, it doesn't mean that the built to sell is wrong for not necessarily doing the alumni program, but most built to sell programs don't necessarily need to do that because they're probably going to be bought by a program that already has an alumni. So that's kind of the difference. Not to be judgmental about it. It's just that probably the way the program is designed, they're going to be sold in a few years, so you wouldn't get that return on that investment right into the alumni program. So that's just kind of the first one I look at.
Yeah, Jeff.
I mean, I think that's actually a great differentiator because if you look at a program that doesn't have a focus on alumni, it kind of gives you an idea of what that ownership group is thinking about. And then that gives you an opportunity to then inquire and say, well, it's interesting to me that we maybe don't have a very sophisticated alumni program. What's your thought process behind that? And then maybe they haven't thought about it, but chances are more likely what Lee said, which is that's a difficult investment to make if you have a time horizon of just 3 to 5 years.
Yeah. Some of the strongest programs have a great alumni program, and we're seeing that, and we're focusing on those programs like through the marketing efforts we're doing. So,
and it's not free. Like that's one thing I do come up against. Well, they've already they got sober with us, so why wouldn't they want to refer, right? And that's a hard conversation to say, well, listen, what we're trying to say is, but we need to build a program that has its own content that keeps people engaged in more than just having another meeting.
Right.
But how do you maintain yourself in their lifestyle now? And then how do you expand beyond just the one person? Maybe you get involved in their family. I mean, Ward Blanchard, who I've worked with for a while, he has a great concept of this sphere of influence. And that's really the genius with alumni, is that all of a sudden you've helped this person, become sober. And now you want to also make sure that you're marketing, if we're going to put our marketing hats on, to that family, because you've changed that family's life for generations now. And that's where I would rather spend our marketing dollars there than I would just running more PPC ads. There's a time and a place for PPC, absolutely. But boy, wouldn't it be great? That's where we talked about previous episodes, Jeff, about the whole transactional nature versus transformation. That's where you really get into transformational marketing. And oh my goodness, when you've now involved that sphere of influence, that's where you get scale and leverage, and people want to talk about how are we lowering our marketing costs. That's how you lower it.
I mean, if done right, an alumni program is a perpetual motion machine. And it's like you may put a lot of energy into building that machine. I mean, it's like machines don't build themselves.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like there's scaffolding and there's architecture that goes around that. But once you get that forward momentum, it is like a perpetual motion machine. And then all you have to do is just make sure that it stays oiled. And to Lee's point, and I completely agree, it's like those are your least expensive admissions. They're your highest value, least investment required in order to generate that. But it's a long-term play in order to do it. But the programs who do that well and then maintain and feed that machine, the dividends are ongoing.
Yeah, you just continue to layer on more marketing tactics, but getting that alumni program strong. I mean, in the agency world, it's very similar in that, our clients, they trust us, they like us, we do good work for them. Like, there's more of an opportunity to go and expand on that business and do more better things with them along the way than it is to go spend the money to go acquire a new client. And so it kind of relates right back to what we're talking about. And I guess, with that, there's such a need. We've talked about it on previous episodes. I mean, the need in this space is just so vast, but also it's also can be a crowded space too. And I guess, getting the messaging and the positioning right, is super important. I know you guys work on it and we've talked about it in previous episodes, but maybe lean into that of like the messaging and positioning for a program, why it's so important for either built to last or built to sell.
So yeah, I'll just start with immediately what comes to mind. We mentioned in a previous episode that there is tremendous demand for these services. And, your job as a smart marketer is to then capture the demand that's right for you, right? Mm-hmm. And so with there being demand for this service, it's not difficult to set up a program that looks like a Me Too program that doesn't put a lot of thought into this energy, into this concept and what makes them unique and put the energy into that, because there's demand, mm-hmm. but it's a very shallow demand for them, and you'll quickly be able to sniff out these programs when their marketing material looks like everybody else's, and their photography looks like everybody else's, and their video content is stock video content, and you're kind of like, wait a second, there's not a lot of depth here, right? And so to me, the whole notion of marketing, just pure definition, is how do you differentiate yourself in the market, mm-hmm. period. And then all of your other strategies flow from that. So are you really clear on who you serve and who you're suited to serve and serve well? And then all of the, the basic marketing stuff in terms of, does your logo support that? Does your collateral support that? All the vehicles around that, the keyword universe, your digital strategy, all of that. It's like you can see a unified, harmonious approach to an overall brand. And I like to tell people, it's like, a great brand when you see it because it works on multiple levels. It works on multiple dimensions and multiple levels. And you could walk into a program that has quality branding, and you could speak to everyone in every department, and they'll know what's our tagline, who do we serve, why do we serve them, what does our logo mean? There's a whole number of things. It's like, and quality programs take the time and effort to recognize that it's like what we present to the world is the level of service that we provide. And if we're not clear about that, the market can't be clear with giving us what we need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mark, when you come into treatment and you're there for however long your length of stay is going to be, you're there with your counselors, with your guides, with your clinical team, with your nurse staff, and you're with them every day. Mm-hmm. But now think about the pre-touch before you admit. You're looking on a website, you're looking at social campaigns, you're looking at paid search. You get none of that. The programs that are really good, they make that seamless. Mm-hmm. So the website is not just some SEO stuffed website, right? That's trying to game Google or Bing or Yahoo, right? No, it's actually got the real staff. There is no stock photography, right? There is content that actually has quotes from your staff, not just a picture on the employment staff section, but it's actually integrated into it so that it's a seamless, right? What you see, what you're experiencing on the web, within social, it flows right through the whole treatment. That's a successful, really well done program. But what happens is a lot of people, they take the shortcuts. And I think that the clients that I have feel powerless. They're like, well, I just hired this company or this agency or my nephew or whatever to do it. Mm-hmm. And that's where people hearing this need to know that if you have stock photography on your website, you can change it today.
Yeah.
You can call up who's responsible and say, I don't want any stock photography on this page. Now, guess what? They're going to panic and they're going to be like, well, guess what? Mm-hmm. They need to bring, they need to bring their butts down to your facility. Mm-hmm. They need to find a photographer and they need to take photos and they need to get on and they need to do it quickly. Mm-hmm. This is not something that should take weeks and months. Like, it can be done within a few days. And that's where I hope that folks that are listening to Jeff and I know they have a lot more power than they think. And some of their ideas about this are probably spot on. And it should, the main idea is that what they experience in treatment, which is probably amazing, should also be the experience they have before they actually admit.
Yeah. Do you have a sense for who's actually going to be providing this care? Mm-hmm. Do you have a sense for who's going to be answering your phone call? Do you have a sense for a level of quality within this organization? That's when you start to get a sense for this is the power of brand, because this starts to tell the story. Mm-hmm. Because we all know as communicators that authenticity wins the day almost every time, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you can present your brand in an authentic way through what it looks like, what it sounds like, how people experience it, then that's going to be a winner every time.
Yeah.
There is another built to last example here. When you approach your marketing in that way, you not only are solving your marketing problem, you're also now solving your recruiting problem.
Yep.
We all have trouble recruiting staff. It's hard to find BHTs. It's hard to find psychiatrists. It's hard to find clinicians. But if you will lean in to that staff and you will help them with their personal brand, you'll help build them on your site, and you're getting content from them, all of a sudden, who wouldn't want to go work there? I want to go work there. You can tell they really lean in and invest in their staff. And the second thing is retention. We can't afford to bring in staff and then they leave in 6 months or a year. But guess what? If you're leaning on them for your content, for your marketing, right, for getting them involved with your alumni, all of a sudden, who wants to leave?
They have
I found my home.
Right. They have a much deeper investment
Yeah.
because you've asked more of them, and then they've been able to present in a way that goes beyond just a job description.
Yeah,
Right?
you guys have definitely, we've touched on this before. Even like Jeff, I think you brought it up, was just about like agencies and marketing firms that approach it as a template, or they put together a template strategy. And what I'm hearing from you guys is the importance of being authentic and telling your story in a way that can not only speak to the customer, speak to the clients that we're bringing in, but also speak to the team that we're trying to recruit and retain in these programs. And, Jeff, we worked on a program together down in an adolescent program that was in Florida. And actually, Lee, you touched on like just getting testimonials, and we took it even a step further, and we got testimonials from the alumni in video form. And, that just spoke so much more authentically because you could hear it in their voice of how they really did impact not only the person, but the families that were involved in it.
Mark, every website you go to you can look at these different company websites, and you'll see a section for testimonials, and it'll have some quote, right? But then it'll just say like Lee or Jeff or Patrick. 99% of them are fake. They're fake, right? They're fake.
Really?
But guess what? Yeah, absolutely. They're making this stuff up. And so if you really want to know the programs that really put their money where their mouth is, like they have stories and photos. Now, I'm not trying to break anonymity. There's certain people that don't want to share, great.
Yeah.
But anonymity is not secrecy. But if you really want to know the real true programs, right, they're ones that actually are authentic, right? And they've got either stories or photos. You can see it, in action.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I encourage programs. I mean, some people are reticent to ask for those testimonials because Lee spoke to the anonymity, and of course, I mean, this is a regulated industry from a HIPAA perspective. So it's like, it's understandable why there may be some reticence to ask for these things. But there's literally no better marketing than an authentic testimonial from someone. It's like the reviews matter and then the quotes matter, but if you can get that in an audio form or a video form where a viewer can actually see and feel the energy and the emotion that's coming from someone, there's literally no better representation.
Yeah, that's a great point. And ultimately, that program ended up going to sell. And so it was impactful in everything that we were building. And I'm sure like buyers look for that type of stuff, is how are we presenting ourselves, the authenticity of this program beyond just, the systems and processes and all the tools that they have in place. It's really like, how does their brand speak, and how's that going to relate to our brand as we bring them into the fold? And so, but I think that was a huge success story that we've seen.
100%. And to follow up on that, I would ask people that are watching or listening to this podcast, do you actually have a brand guide? Do you actually have guidelines associated with your colors, your logo? Because this is an area where I see just more often than not, people are misusing the logo, and it's like they're well intentioned, right? But it's like they'll drop it in a Word doc, and they'll grab the corner, and they'll distort the proportion on it, or things like that. And it's like, ask yourself, would Coca-Cola do that with their brand?
Yeah,
absolutely not.
I hear it all the time from clients. They'll say, I don't like the content that the current writers are doing or the agency's doing, and I'll ask, well, what have you given them your aspirational themes?
Yep.
No.
So,
So
I mean, you think about you think about a couple of documents that should really be your marketing handbook. They should definitely have a brand guide that's been developed professionally, and it should look like a big boy brand. It should look like Nike or Coca-Cola, and it's like to tell you exactly how we use taglines and how we use logos and how we use colors and all of that sort of thing, so that anybody can look about how you need to present to the world. Okay, so you need to have a brand guide. You need to have a well thought out keyword universe that informs all of your marketing strategies. And then Lee just touched on it. You need to have a document that lays out your aspirational themes. And the aspirational themes really speak to when someone enters into your program, what do you want them to feel? What do you want them to leave having experienced? So it's like, you think about it, it's like Disney has that. Why don't you? So it's your brand is just as important as these major national brands that we just talked about. But a lot of times that seems to be the last thing that people want to address.
Everybody's so excited about AI, and it's all about the prompts that you give to AI and how it learns. But we don't do that for our own content teams. That's I'm always amazed that we'll hire a writer and we'll say, go write me an article on equine therapy in Nashville, Tennessee. But we haven't given them the prompts. They haven't maybe gone through an equine practice at our facility. They haven't met our staff. They haven't, and you're wondering why you're not happy with the SEO writing.
Well, you guys have almost like touched on just this one topic, is that everything that you do in your program is marketing. Like, from the ways the calls are answered, we've talked about this on past episodes, is the way the calls are answered, to the way I'm presenting myself online, to the way that translates into the brochures that we're creating that we take to a trade show. It's the way that we interact at trade shows with other, programs, and
it should all feed back to the type of clinical care you provide.
That's it.
It should all feed back to the service that you provide, and then you're presenting an on-ramp to that quality service. And you want to make sure that it is repeatable. You want to make sure that it is scalable, and then you train people to understand that it is those things and how important their role is in making that happen. I mean, Lee already touched on that, and I think it's so important. It's easy for a team member to be isolated in their one function. But if you can help them understand the role that they play in terms of impacting a life and impacting an important measurement for the organization, I mean, it's like you've just changed the whole ballgame for that person and then for your company.
Yeah, this is, great content. Please, if you have comments or you have any questions around this content that we're producing, please drop them in the comments so that we can either create an episode for you or, we can touch on it on the next episode. But, we want this to be engaging. We want it to be a two-way conversation. So please drop any questions you have into the comments and we'll cover them. But guys, this is a great segment, great topic. Let me ask you just one last, why do programs fail? What is it about, they don't have this in place, they fail? What are some other common things you're seeing?
So one of the first things that I think is a flaw that's potentially fatal is a disconnect between clinical programming and marketing programming. So the challenge here is the marketing team is going to go out and execute a marketing plan based upon what they understand. You need to make sure that the clinical program is actually delivering those services. So it's like they're actually delivering on what you're telling the world that you are, right? And so then the reverse can be true, which is, clinical actually doesn't believe in the marketing plan, or there's a disconnect there. And it's like that intersection between marketing and clinical is where I see the biggest pitfall. And quality organizations figure this out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for me, consistency is a big one. I see people start and stop all the time, and not just with content creation or with different marketing platforms they get involved with, but also with their staff. Mm-hmm. You know, there's a constant, you know, they're on that wheel. You know, people coming in, leaving, changing agencies, doing. And I think that lack of consistency can really hurt, you know, not to mention the lack of consistency with rankings, right? And then the second thing I think is the training. I think there's so many programs that I'm hearing about on a monthly basis that, you know, they're laying people off or doing this and that. And I always get back to, were you training the people answering the calls? Mm-hmm. Were you making sure that your staff have the right certifications and are keeping up with the technology? Because those things get cut pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. Like when there starts to be things tightening up, it's like, oh, that's an easy thing to cut. And that will hurt you in the long run for sure.
Yeah. You guys have worked with so many programs throughout the years. Do you ever see that, like, ego gets in the way? The glitter, like, maybe just, and you don't have to, like, please don't, like, call out a specific, but just, I mean, where do you see, like, ego play into either? One, ego can be a powerful tool to get you to a different place, like either sold, or ego could be the enemy of the program. What do you guys see?
Yeah, I think it's a huge, because I think that we have a real issue in the industry right now with inflation. Title inflation.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody you talk to is now a chief marketing officer. And I'm always amazed. I'm like, generally an officer, like there's some fiduciary responsibility. Maybe you've invested, you're part of the C-suite, and we're just throwing out these titles, which then create their own problem, because maybe they're good in that one thing. You know, maybe they were a good BD person, or maybe they were a good alumni, or maybe they were a good digital marketer. But CMO like really brings in a lot more than just that one thing. And I think what's happened with the title inflation too is an easy way to not pay people. Okay, well, I'm not going to give you a raise. I'm going to give you this big fancy title. I mean, I see that as a huge ego, you know, problem. And then I think for people, listen, I'm 56 years old. We talked about it in previous episodes. The internet wasn't around when I graduated college. So I feel like I have faced the technology challenge without ego, because I know this stuff was not around as I was coming up. I've had to learn it. But there are some people that the technology really scares them, and they're afraid, and they know that, oh, I don't know anything about LinkedIn. I don't know anything, you know, about digital marketing, and so they panic. And so they generally then will want to like say that's not important, or that's not my program. I don't get internet leads. You know, I mean, I've heard that a lot too. And that may be fair that you don't want to maybe put resources into that. That's okay. But I think that's where ego can also then hurt people from the long run, because I have something in my book that I talk about that you may not be disrupted right now, but disruption is coming. Innovation is coming, whether you like it or not. Innovation is coming. It's coming all the time.
Yeah, I mean, Mark, it's interesting that you asked the ego question. I mean, it's like ego can be a powerful force, it can be a destructive force, and it's interesting that we're talking about behavioral health, because I mean, to me, one of the challenges I think in becoming an enlightened human is actually learning to manage your ego, and actually learning to realize there's more to it than just what your ego has to say. And with that being said, there are a lot of personalities in this field, as with any field. I mean, like when I came up in the entertainment industry, oh my goodness, it's like I understand egos better than most. And I see similarities in this industry as well. And what I've seen is like, it can only take you so far. And then there needs to be some humility. To Lee's point, is like, if you haven't been disrupted yet, just wait. You will be disrupted.
Yeah.
And then when that happens, you can't be so strong in your own ego that you're right about everything. You need to have enough humility to be curious, to ask the right questions, to seek outside counsel, and then be wise in how you take that in. You've got to set that ego aside in order to hear that. And then some people, unfortunately, they just only learn lesson the hard way. And for some people, pain is the only teacher. And I would just say that if that's your case, then I think you need to question who's driving the bus. Is it the wise mind or is it the ego mind?
Wow. Great conversation today, guys. This has been unbelievable. And I know the listeners out there have just taken so many things away from it. But, as we jump into the lightning round today, maybe just give us your top 3 takeaways, things that you'd want the listeners to leave with.
I think somewhat already touched on.
Yeah.
I think you've got to start documenting today. I think you have to train, and I think you have to. You've got allies within your whole company, and probably families like an alumni, investors. You got a lot of allies. You need to incorporate them in your approach.
Yeah.
I just go back to you're building a machine. Regardless of what it is that you're talking about, it's and again, machines don't build themselves. They require architecture, they require skill, and they require maintenance. So if you take a look at all the things that we've talked about, regardless of how big you want to grow and whether you want to build to sell or you want to build to last, you're still building a machine that needs to be scaled, and you're also building a machine that requires fuel. And so I like to think about the machine sort of as like branding as a container around that machine. And then the fuel that you put into it are the various tactics and the strategies that you're doing in terms of at what speed, at what scale, at what function. But you've got to look at it from that standpoint and say that machine is what's going to propel you into the future. Are you making the investments necessary, or are you cheaping out on, eventually that machine is going to break down.
Yeah. Unbelievable points today, guys. Lee, Jeff, thanks so much for leaning into this conversation. I know lots of takeaways, so really appreciate it. I just want to say thank you to the listeners. Without you all, this show wouldn't even be possible. Appreciate you being here for MasterMined, where we are rethinking behavioral health.
That wraps up this episode of MasterMined. Thank you so much for joining us. And remember, MasterMined is not just a podcast, it's a community. So don't forget to comment, subscribe, and review us. Your feedback helps us continue to bring you content that's relevant and relatable. Thanks again to our sponsor, Snapshot, a digital media marketing agency. And thank you for joining us on MasterMined, your behavioral health playbook.